this is our next speaker. Actually, is the first father-son combination we've ever had here. If you remember the last time we were in Mulhouse, I brought with me a guy by the name of Nick Davis, who was one of the analytic guys from the Milwaukee Brewers. And of course, you followed the Brewers this year, you saw what a great year they had. Well, Paul is Nick's father. So this is the first time in ISG history we had a father who's come after a son, or both people in a family. So Paul Davis was a pitching coach in minor leagues for many years with the St. Louis Cardinals, and just recently, I think it was last Thursday, we're saying, right?
Yeah, a week ago.
It was announced that he's now the Major League pitching coach for the Seattle Mariners. Extensive background at Creighton University, played at Creighton, Omaha, another Midwest guy. I love Midwest guys. We had let's say 7 centimeters of snow this morning in Milwaukee, my hometown. So yeah, so I'm glad I'm here. It's 50. It was 15 or 16 today. It was a nice day here. But another Midwest guy who understands those spring games in 2-degree weather that we have to play. But Paul's got some great philosophy about throwing and about pitching, and I'm just going to turn it over to him. Paul Davis.
All right, thank you. So I will just click it there. Or the forward?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So thanks for having me. And a couple questions I have. I want to kind of go around the room. I'll just raise your hand here. How many of you primarily deal with pitchers under the age of 13? Just raise your hand. Okay, all right. So some of you will deal with a lot of these. You can raise your hand multiple times. Okay, 13 to 18. Okay, and then 18 and above. All right, okay, so you guys all, and one of the interesting things that I can say is I've coached kids from the age of 8 to professional guys. And I think you learn a lot by working with those wide ranges of ages. I'll show some video tomorrow of a couple kids that I worked with last week in Omaha. That a friend of mine, guy who I coached in college, he's got 2 sons and a nephew, and I used them a little bit as a guinea pig to get a little video of some things that I wanted to show you. But it was really insightful. The youngest one, who is 9, a 9-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 17-year-old. The youngest one was the best mover by far. That he knew, his body is very smart. And that's one of the things that I want to get into here that as I get going. My goal here this weekend is to kind of give you in sequence some of the things that I think are really important to teach pitching. And the first one is to understand a little bit about the anatomy of throwing. And I'll go through some of this fairly quickly. Some we'll spend a little bit more time on. I have about, 2 hours here, Tom? Is that right?
A little bit shy of that.
No, okay. So Dave and I share this in common, that you can tell Dave's a passionate guy. I'm a passionate guy. I can talk about pitching 24/7, 365. Okay, so please, I hope you get to ask a lot of questions. I'm going to be here for a couple days. I don't leave until Monday, so please, if you have some questions, and I hope you will, just grab me and let's talk. So one of the things I will throw out to you before I start here is that you will likely not hear me mention the term pitching mechanics over the course of the next several days. I do not like that term, pitching mechanics, and even I will say that the Jerry DiPoto, who I'm very grateful that he hired me with the Seattle Mariners, and Jerry said that I'm kind of a mechanics guy. I'm a movement guy is what I am. That I'm interested in how athletes move, how pitchers move. Because I feel like a lot of times when we use the word mechanics, we get into this idea that it's a paint by number, very robotic type of approach. I love golf. I like to play golf. I grew up in Florida, actually. Like to play golf in my spare time. I'll be playing a little less golf most likely now. But I think you can see, if you look at professional golfers all around the world, the best golfers, it's not a real cookie cutter type approach with their swings, that there are guys who look different that are at the highest level of the game. Now, when you look at them in high-speed video and you see certain common things and how they attack the golf ball, it all looks pretty similar. But there are constants in how great athletes move. And so that's one of the things that I want to share with you here as we get going. So just a quick little overview of what we'll talk about tonight. The spinal engine. The spine is what we're talking about. You have to be able to control your spine in order to throw anything and to hit anything. And really, great athletes have to control their spine, whatever you are doing in athletics. I want to talk a little bit about the shoulder and elbow structure, just so we know that, okay? That I think it's important to understand. How many of you, this is another question, how many of you have an athletic trainer that works with your team or your club? Okay, so this is one reason why. Very few of you. What is it, one? Did I see one hand went up? This, again, I want to see. How many of you have an athletic trainer? One. So you really need to have an understanding of anatomy when you work with pitchers, because what happens to pitchers a lot? They get hurt. They deal with pain. It just happens. And so where I came from in this personally is I dealt with a lot of pain and a lot of injuries between the ages of 19 and 22 when I was a college pitcher. And I got to the point finally where I got tired of feeling like I had an ice pick stuck in the back of my shoulder. And I said, enough. Okay, I can't deal with it. I can't play anymore. And so that really is part of who I am as a pitching coach, to understand that this is what pitchers are dealing with a lot of times, and I need to understand. Fortunately for me as a professional coach, I don't have to be the trainer. And I'm not a trainer, I'm not a doctor, but I know enough now that I can have conversations with the trainers and the doctors to help me help the pitchers. Okay, so that's one of the things why I really want to share this with you guys. We'll talk about joints and movement. What do the joints in the body do? How do they move? A little bit about myofascial lines. Has anyone in here ever heard of anatomy trains? Okay, one person, two people. Okay, so want to introduce a little bit about the concept of myofascial lines, understand, soft tissue, how things are connected, and how that impacts movement. Planes of movement that we'll get into, the planes that the body can move, and how you have to load those planes in order to throw anything. And then lastly, we'll look at some pictures here tonight of other throwers that I have learned a lot by studying how shot putters, discus throwers, javelin throwers, quarterbacks in American football, even volleyball hitters, okay, overhead athletes, other throwers, how they move their body. And I have some little exercises that I've done with some of our pitchers to move as a shot putter. And that I think it's helped me understand how the body has to move. And again, it's thinking about, well, what is the goal, right? What is if I want to throw hard as a pitcher, it is the same as throwing far. And athletes in track and field are all about throwing far, and they have to use their body efficiently. All right, so first thing is, let's talk about the spine real quick. So the spine is a natural curve. It's not a rigid rod in our back. It's got 4 natural curves: cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral. And the spine can tilt. Okay, it can move in a lot of different directions because of this. And that really, I think, understanding how the spine can move helps us understand a lot of the movements that we see in athletics. If you understand the spine, I think it helps you with, there isn't a little laser pointer on here, is there? No? Okay. It helps you understand things about energy expenditure, muscle effort, joint strain, effective momentum. Those are things that are involved in pitching, involved in any type of throwing. So, and I should go back a little. Serge Grekovetsky. Has anyone ever heard of Serge Grekovetsky? Okay, he's on my list. A couple names that are references. I would encourage you to Google him. There is plenty of things on the internet. He wrote a seminal book. It's about 600 and some pages. He was an engineer by trade, taught at, I believe it was University of Toronto. Wrote this book called The Spinal Engine, and it's a fascinating look into how the spine really drives movement. And so some of his thoughts is that if you look at what the lumbar spine is really responsible for, it's moving the pelvis, the thoracic spine. You can move the shoulders, and really the cervical is there to kind of decouple.
Excuse me, I think you have a data point up there.
Oh, okay. Where would it be?
Yep. Top.
Ah, there we go. Beautiful.
Top bottom.
Yep.
Bottom.
Okay.
Top.
So, right. Yeah. Okay. Very nice. So there's a video that is Greg Kovetsky giving a presentation at a fascial meeting that was at Harvard maybe 10, 11 years ago, and he shows cheetahs, fastest animal on the planet, cheetahs running, and how their cervical spine kind of disconnects and enables the rest of their spine to move in a very rhythmic pattern. I'll show you some video of Max Scherzer. Hopefully I can get to that tomorrow, where I believe you can see the same thing. That Max Scherzer is a phenomenal mover. And it's funny because I've talked with a lot of pro scouts, just sitting behind home plates having conversation, and at times I'll mention something about Scherzer and they say, "Oh wow, it's really violent." No, it's not violent. It's just fast. Okay, when you look at a lot of great athletes, they do things that we think sometimes are violent, but they're moving exceptionally fast, which is the key to performance. So, how are the spine and pelvis, how are they connected? How do they coordinate? So, if you think about this thorax platform or plane, you can see how if you get a counter rotation of the thoracic spine, some lateral bending in here near the waist, and then with the lumbar spine, you can get the motion of the pelvis. Okay, if you were to look at this, right, where we have the shoulders going this way and the pelvis turning the other way, what do we call that in baseball? There's a term that we call it.
Shoulder rotation?
Separation. Okay? So that's really how you achieve that. There's nothing magic to it. Okay? It's just being able to coordinate your pelvis, spine. I'll throw in your scaps. Okay? So if you understand this is what you're going to get. This is how people who throw and hit things far or hard, they do this. A lot of them just do it very naturally. So it's trainable, however. Okay, and again, this is something why I started looking at a lot of the best pitchers, the best throwers to understand, well, what's really going on here with the body. All right, so this is just a diagram of a lot of the micro muscles of the spine, which are often overlooked. I put this up here just because, again, it's along the rib cage. We sometimes neglect this. There's a misunderstanding about, well, what do we need to be strong? This is a lot of the stuff that you need to be strong. And when I show you some slides of the myofascial lines, I think it'll maybe make a little bit more sense. So some of the pelvic and hip musculature. The psoas here, the psoas is kind of this big muscle right in here. Anybody ever have a problem with your psoas? Okay, I have. It's not, Dave, yeah? Not a whole lot of fun.
No.
Right? And I'm telling you, you can't move well at all if you have some psoas issues. When you look at the adductors, okay, in here, these are key. The IT band, okay, so all of these things here, and here's the hip, right? The hip connects. A lot of times I think especially I get this all the time in baseball, that people talk about hips. Well, you got to rotate your hips. No, you got to rotate your pelvis. Okay? That the hips are connected to the pelvis. The pelvic rotation is what is key. So, if I were, even though I have some of these common shoulder injuries up here, just anybody ever have a shoulder issue? How many of you have ever had shoulder tendonitis? Okay, rotator cuff tendonitis, or anybody ever have a rotator cuff tear? Okay, welcome to the club. How about an impingement? Okay, torn labrum. Anybody with a torn labrum? Okay, that's no fun either. Okay. Has anyone ever had thoracic outlet syndrome? You get a pitcher sometimes. Well, there have been several guys that big league pitchers kind of have the holy grail of injuries: Tommy John surgery, rotator cuff, and thoracic outlet. I think Matt Harvey has had all of those. It's not what you want to have happen. Okay. And then this is just here. I just put up this little diagram. I think it's helpful to understand. This is what the shoulder looks like. Okay, got the humeral head in here. Right here's the labrum, the glenoid, the whole socket, the rotator cuff muscles. So just to understand how complex the shoulder is. The shoulder is way more complex than the elbow, okay? Before I put the next slide up, does anybody know how many muscles attach to the scapula? How many muscles attach to the scapula? Anybody want to guess? Got a guess? 10? 5 or 6? Anybody want to go higher? 40. Okay, it's not 40. 17. Okay, there's 13 really that are really well connected, and then you can take these 7 here, or the 4 here, or whatever. I'm off. So, pec minor, subscapularis. Anybody know can anybody tell me where the subscapularis is? Subscap. Where is it?
It's on the inside of the scapula, like right on the, pretty much between the scapula and the ribcage.
Yes. Okay. I happen to have some subscap issues going on a few years ago. So I had a couple of our trainers would help me out, get in, really kind of stretch it out. So they have to stick their hand in here and deep into your armpit so they can reach on the back side of your scapula. So your scapula is sitting here like this. So it's this area that's facing, right? Trust me, you do not want to have subscap problems, okay? It's not real comfortable to have a guy digging into your shoulder, but once you get it released, nice feeling. Teres minor, teres major, very easy to tear, okay? You have guys that just don't move well and put a large amount of stress, that they don't decelerate, okay? When you have guys who decelerate poorly, there's a really good chance that they could tear the teres major, the teres minor. This is when you get guys that have lat problems also, okay? So, again, I list these because I think it's important to simply understand where these muscles are, what's going on. So not that you're going to be a doctor, but if you're by yourself, you might have some idea of, oh, okay, I can see now, hopefully by the end of this weekend, you'll have a little bit more idea of being able to see and diagnose what's going on. And if you have one of your pictures that has some pain, you can understand where and why. Okay, so scapular movement. The reason why I want to put this up here is I think you have to understand, again, how the scaps need to move when you throw things. And I think many pitchers don't understand, and they don't move their scaps very well, especially if you're throwing a lot and you start to have some issues. Now you get inhibitions. Then what happens with those 17 muscles, some get longer, some get shorter, and now you will have some inhibitions in how the scaps are supposed to move. So your scaps can elevate, they can depress, they adduct, abduct, right? You can rotate them upward, downward, right? In throwing, there are certain movements that should be happening at certain times with the scapulas. And if your spine and your pelvis move properly, the scaps will go along with it. Okay, so one of the things that I think, well, let me ask you this. If you have we have two scapulas. Okay, everybody has two scapulas. When we're thinking about throwing a baseball, should our scapulas work together or should they work differently? How many of you say differently? How many of you say they should work together? Okay, they should work together. They should, they have to. Okay? You have to get them to be able to work together so that you're going to be able to rotate properly and stay connected. All right? And I'll explain more tomorrow when I show some pictures and video of some really good movers and some poor movers. Okay, the elbow. Anyone here, has anyone here ever had Tommy John surgery? Okay, a couple guys. All right. So just so we know, again, I think it's important to understand, you hear all the time the medial or the lateral elbow. Okay? Can someone show me the medial side of your elbow? Where would that be? Is it here, inside, or the outside? Inside. It's the inside. This is the medial elbow. The lateral elbow is out here. Okay? Just again, so you know. What happens a lot, what you see in young throwers oftentimes, is you will get epicondylitis. Okay? The growth plate is around in here, and you get some separation in the epicondyle. Okay? So, if you're dealing with young throwers, that's something to be aware of. Ulnar nerve issues. Okay, so you got the yellow line here, that's the ulnar nerve that runs along here. And it's not uncommon for throwers to have issues with their ulnar nerve. If that's happening, that should be a sign to you that that thrower is not moving efficiently. You can throw plenty of times without having a lot of these problems. Okay, the posterior chain, for lack of a better term. So the back side of your legs. It's really important. What is the largest muscle in the human body? It's the glutes. Okay, you want to put them together, and it's important to be able to, to use those correctly. Right? Then you've got to be able to load the posterior chain. You need to be able to use the posterior chain when you decelerate your body when you throw something. The foot. How many of you knew that there were 26 bones and 33 joints in the foot? Anybody know that? Probably not. It was a surprise to me when I learned that. But the foot is really important when you throw something, because what is the foot in contact with? The ground. Okay? If your feet are not strong and flexible, how are you going to be able to put force into the ground with the back foot and then land and put force into the ground with your front foot? The ground is your friend. I say this all the time in talking with pitchers. The ground is your friend. You've got to learn how to use the ground to then use your spine correctly, produce force rapidly. I won't get into it a whole lot, but I'll give you a term: the rate of force development. The rate of force development is what performing in athletics is all about. And I'll just throw this out here too, that one of the things that you see a lot of times with conventional weightlifting is a problem, in my view, with conventional weightlifting is that oftentimes you have too much time. Right? A pitcher and a hitter. How long does that movement take? From the time a pitcher separates his hands and he makes that motion of throwing, how long is it going to take? A second-ish. Okay? Not very long at all. For a hitter strides once he begins to go forward, put his foot into the ground, rotates. How long does that take? Less than a second, right? So you've got to be able to produce force at a highly rapid rate. And if your feet have problems, it's going to be real difficult to do that. How many of you have ever tried to play with a sprained ankle? Especially if you're a right-handed player, right-handed hitter, okay, trying to hit with a sprained right ankle, right-handed pitcher, okay, very difficult. And then even if you've sprained your front foot, that might be even worse. Okay, so, and I would include the ankle into this, right? Any of these things with the foot. How many of you have ever had plantar fasciitis? No one? Okay. Lucky you guys. Yeah, I've had it. No fun. Pretty tough to plant and actually produce force. All right, so this slide just briefly shows the types of movement that the body can engage in. Okay? So we have flexion, and this, if you guys will be able to get the slide, but you can look at this. Right, you have flexion in a lot of different joints. You have extension. You have rotation, abduction, adduction, circumduction. Okay? So then if we go to type of joint that it is and the type of movement that joint is capable of. Okay? So how are the elbow and the shoulder different? Actually, I think everybody knows they're different. Why? Why is the elbow and the shoulder different? Yes?
Well, the shoulder has to do a lot of motion, like the range of motion of the shoulder is completely different than to the elbow. The elbow can't go rotational like the shoulder does.
Why? Why can't the elbow...
The shoulder is like this and the elbow is more joined, so you have no flexibility to the side.
Okay, so the elbow is a hinge joint. How many bones do we have here at the elbow? You got two coming here, radius ulna, okay, right? And then I've got the humerus. So I've got two attached to one. So it hinges. Okay, so that's why the elbow flexes and extends. Okay, that's what the elbow does. The shoulder and the knee is the same way. Okay, but it can do a few different things, a modified hinge. But think about in your lower leg, you've got two bones, right? Femur. So the shoulder and the hip, they're ball and socket joints. So the shoulder, because it's a ball and socket, it can rotate, flex, extend, adduct, abduct, circumduction. I can do a lot of different things with my shoulder. But that makes it much more complex. Okay, it's why surgeons will tell you, I mean, now with surgical techniques, Tommy John surgery, piece of cake. Any good orthopedic surgeon can do a Tommy John. Boom, they just go in, boom, it's over with. When a shoulder, they go in to look at a shoulder, oftentimes they have no idea what they're going to see. And it's why even for really experienced surgeons, skilled surgeons, they will tell you, man, if I have to go in and do some big work on a shoulder, the odds of coming back are way less than if you have an elbow repair. It's just much more complex. But that complexity is what really enables throwers, especially baseball throwers, to throw very hard. Anybody have a guess? Anybody know? Okay, so I have to use, when I throw a baseball, I'm rotating. What kind of rotation do I use? Internal rotation. Okay, I get to a position of external rotation and then I internally rotate. How many degrees per second would a 90-mile-an-hour baseball thrower be rotating their shoulder at?
7,000.
7,000 plus. Okay? So 7,200 degrees per second is how many times around in a second? 20. It's extremely fast. It's probably the fastest movement that humans are possible or capable of doing. How many degrees per second can the elbow extend? You got that one?
No.
32, 35, 3,600. Okay? The best throwers will have more elbow extension. Okay? How many of you are familiar with the kinetic chain? If I say the kinetic chain, so what is the principle of the kinetic chain? The general principle of the kinetic chain.
Well, that the force builds up through the different joints.
Okay, so if we were to go from the ground up, that would mean I go from ankle to knee to hip, shoulder, elbow, wrist, right? Guess what? When it comes to throwing, that's wrong. Throwing violates the kinetic chain. If I said to you, the elbow needs to be going before the shoulder when you throw a baseball, how many of you would say, nah, you're crazy? Anybody want to disagree? Think about that one, okay? I'm going to leave that one with you. I want you to ruminate on that, okay? And tomorrow I'll show you. The reason why that has to happen, again, is because to get my elbow to extend, it needs to be going first, okay? And from an injury standpoint, do I want to be rotating my shoulder at 70 to 7,500 degrees per second when my elbow is fully extended, at least close to fully extension like this, or when my elbow is flexed? Which one's probably going to be better for my elbow ligament and the shoulder complex? It's when my elbow is fully extended. Okay? That's what happens, right? How many of you here have thrown in American football? Okay? How many of you have used an American football with your athletes, your baseball athletes? Okay? How many of you have some of your baseball players that can't throw a spiral at all? Okay? To throw a really good spiral, you have to be moving efficiently. You have to think about it. When you throw an American football, your elbow has to extend, then you internally rotate your shoulder. That's what's happening. That's what you want to have happen when you throw a baseball. Okay, you really do. All right, so I'm going to go quickly here through the myofascial lines. So this idea, anatomy trains a guy by the name of Thomas Myers. The idea is that soft tissue is connected, okay? The whole body is connected via these lines of fascia. And what is fascia? Well, fascia is the kind of the sinewy, the white collagen that if you were to take a piece of beef, okay, and you see, you can kind of pull the little white sinewy stuff off of a big hunk of beef, okay? Because when you eat a piece of beef, you're eating the muscle from a cow. So the idea is that we are wrapped in this case of fascia, and that there are certain lines of fascia that are all connected. Okay, and I'm just going to run through some of these quickly. And I think you'll be able to see, if I'm able to show some video tomorrow, you'll see some of these in action. So, first one is you have a superficial back line. So, again, you think about the muscles of the spine, how this would interact. And that you have this line of fascia that runs along the backside, and it gets involved actually when the body is moving forward. And then you have a superficial front line. Okay? So, very similar to the back line. If you think, I want you to think in terms of posture. Okay? That when you look at people and what their posture is, and then there's a term that I really like that the anatomy trains people have come up with called acture. That acture is posture in action. Think about, these are not, and I like to use this as an example, 3 disciplines, if you will, that I think when you look at the disciplines, athletes, when you look at the people engaged in these, the acture is beautiful. Martial arts, ballet, and gymnastics. Okay, I've said this for the last 8, 9, 10 years, that if I could go back in time and work with my sons, I would have enrolled them in martial arts, gymnastics, and ballet when they were young children. Because those people involved in those disciplines learn how to use their body. And by using, and think about it, do martial artists lift large amounts of weight? No. Gymnastics are lifting their own body. They're propelling their own body. Ballet dancers have to move their body. It's extremely difficult. If any of you has anyone here ever done any type of a ballet class? Okay? I'm not afraid to admit it, I will go to ballet bar classes at times. I'm the only guy there. I will do it, and 15 minutes into it, my glutes are absolutely on fire. And I will say to a couple of teachers back home that I've done this, and I would love to get pitchers engaged in those types of workouts. Because you would learn how to load your glutes, how to load your body, and how to move. Okay, so the spiral line might be the most important for throwers. So the idea here really is that you have this sling of muscle, tendon, ligament that starts on the inside of your foot, comes up, goes from left hip across, under the scaps, back around, and down, and then on the back side, it runs similar to the superficial back line, okay? And then when I show you video, I want you to think about how you would load and stretch this line in a pitcher's body. And then I'll show you a couple pictures that I think do it extremely well. This is called the deep front line. And so if you think about the pelvis, okay, and the muscles that are attached to the pelvis here and up into the rib cage, and then on the back side, all of these muscles here that attach. What might be a common phrase that is used in strength training that could describe this deep front line?
Core.
Absolutely. This is the core. That if you strengthen this area, movement will become much easier, much more efficient, much more fluid. So for me, really, it's the deep front line, the spiral line that in throwing are really important. All of them are important, but these are vitally important. Okay, then you have arm lines. You have a deep front arm line. Okay, you get into the pecs. Okay, the pec. This is an example here. Here's the pec major and here's the pec minor. And then you have some of the rhomboids here on the backside. These are functional lines. And when you see pitchers that decelerate very well, they are using this back functional line very, very well. These are the brakes. Pitchers that are throwing 95 miles an hour, if they don't have a strong back functional line, it's going to be harder for them to slow that body down. All right, so thinking now about planes of motion. What planes can the body move in? All right? And if we think about those lines, muscles, muscle function results in movement. And what I'd like you to try and do is if you could think about shifting your thinking from isolation of muscles, and even though I've kind of given you some muscles and isolated certain parts of the body, I'd like you to think rather than isolation, but think about patterns of movement and muscle function. Okay? And I think again, as I show some video tomorrow, you'll see some pictures here coming up of throwers. I think you'll start to get an idea of what some of those patterns of movement are. The function of muscles often depends upon the context. Okay, I think even though there are very similar types of movement involved in baseball in throwing, pitching, and hitting, why would it be somewhat different? Why would you have muscles that are going to do a little different thing? How are the contexts of pitching and hitting different, even though I'm rotating? I'm rotating in both. But what's different?
It's different plane.
Sorry?
You hit this way and pitch the other way.
You actually have to rotate very well in pitching. What's the big difference?
Reaction versus dictation.
Oh, there's a little of that, I think. I'm thinking of something different, though.
The downhill movement of the pitcher as he goes forward compared to the hitter being on plane surface.
That certainly plays a role. Okay? Certainly it does play a role. There's one other, though, that I think can be very different. What's different about hitting? If I'm going to throw versus hit.
No, you're moving also.
No? How many hands am I using when I hit? When I hold the bat? I have both hands on the bat. Okay, versus when I throw, it's a little different. A lot of similarities, but I think contextually there's slight differences. Unless you want to just swing with one hand. And I know hitting coaches will have guys swinging with one hand, but you actually use both. So one of the things too, different muscles can be synergists, they can be antagonists, stabilizers, okay, neutralizers. You have to get all of these working together, right? And that's really important. So I think that's another reason why, as you understand some muscles, muscle function, you then get an idea of, hey, well, this guy, he has poor balance, okay, or he can't stabilize his back hip, he can't load his back hip, he can't load his glutes. Well, why is that? Maybe it's not a function of what's going on his back leg. It might be a function of what's going on his front leg or his front shoulder. Okay, so these things all work together. Movement is complex. It's in reaction to gravity, ground forces, momentum. Okay, and we've got to use all three planes. All three planes. So here are the planes of motion. You have the sagittal, the coronal, the transverse. So essentially, look, I can move forward and back. I can go right and left. And what else can I do?
Rotate.
I can rotate. That's important. Okay? Forward and back, up and down, right and left. Okay? I will tell you that you need to be able to load all three of those planes when you throw any object. You need to load those planes of movement in order to rotate on time. Okay, so think about this, right? Let's see. I want to use you, Axel. Okay, stand up here for a second. I want you to stand right here. Okay, so if I said to you, you are going to take a baseball and you're going to throw it absolutely as far as you can in that direction.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you cannot take any stride, but what are you going to do? What are you going to do?
Bend myself backside.
Okay? Now, think of it in terms of there's three planes of movement. Okay? You have up and down, you have right and left, and you have forward and back. Okay, so here. So if he's facing this way, if he needs to load forward and back, what is he first? Okay, well, let's do up and down. What's the first thing he needs to do if he's going to throw it as far as he can? Okay, you'd coach him to get a little lower, right? Okay, so how are you going to get lower? What's going to have to happen?
So mobilize my legs.
Okay.
My knee back.
Okay.
Down.
So he's got to get lower. Lower. If I said, I want you to throw this thing as far as you can, he's got to get lower. Now, what's he going to have to do as far as front and back? What does he need to do? Do you think, is it going to help if he takes his hips back? Okay, the hip's going to go back. This shoulder, okay, if this right hip goes back, this shoulder needs to go forward. Okay? Now, if he's going to load up, let's turn this way. If he's going to load right and left, where does he want to get most of his weight initially to throw the ball that way? He's a right-handed thrower. He's got to get it on his right side. Okay? So let's do that. Go down. And now let's take this. Now he's loaded in all three planes. Okay? He's got it. If he's going to throw farther by getting into this position, show me what you did before we.
Like that.
Okay? You see what he just did? How's he going to throw it very far doing that? How's he going to throw it very hard doing that? So one of the things that you will see, thanks Axel. One of the things that you will see, again, is the notion of, and something that I've used with a lot of different pitchers, is we'll have them stand on the mound and just throw the ball as far as you can. We'll put a guy, we with the Cardinals, we had a complex where we had 4 fields, okay? So we had this big tower in the middle of the complex, okay? Middle of the quad. We'd send a guy 220, 250 feet down towards the tower. Got a guy on the mound. Okay, throw it to him. Get after it, all right? But you have to load in all 3 planes. So here's some pictures. I'm going to finish by showing you some pictures of other throwers, all right? And I want you to be thinking about questions as you see some of these pictures. And I want you to, I'm not going to go through them really fast here, but look at the pictures. What I just talked about with Axel. Okay, these are all world-class throwers. Okay, these are some of the best guys in the world. I just got on Getty Images and grabbed some pictures. Okay, so look at how they load their body. Early Drew Brees there as a San Diego Charger. All right, so a couple of quick takeaways here that I'd like to leave you with. Every thrower has the same architecture, okay, the same body architecture. Everybody has a pelvis, a spine, 2 scapulas, you've got hips, shoulders, elbow. We all have the same basic architecture. Axel, go ahead and stand up here again for a second. Sorry, I got to use you. Okay? If you were coaching Axel and you're coaching me, what's different about our bodies?
You're taller.
I am taller. What else? Because I'm taller, it may or may not happen, but typically, okay? Go ahead, put your hand up. What do I have? I have longer limbs. Okay? Those of you, thanks. If you remember my son Nick when he was here, he's extremely long. He's almost 6'5". His wingspan is 7 feet. Now, when he played basketball, that length helped him tremendously. Because on a limited court, right? You got to find out, here's the boundaries, right? The rim is 10 feet high. That length helped him a lot. But when he got on the mound, was that length a good thing or a problematic thing? It's problematic, okay? Because the longer, just think, the longer an athlete's limbs are, what does he need? More time, okay? They have to have more time. So, because of that time, sometimes they have difficulty controlling their spine. But think about controlling the spine. What are pitchers going to have to do to control that spine? The size and shape of the implement can put constraints on throwers. Why is a baseball a little more difficult to throw than those implements that I just showed you? A baseball is more difficult. What about a football makes it easier to throw a football?
Heavier.
It's a little heavier.
Use large muscles too.
What about it? How's the shape different? It's an oblong shape. It gives you feedback immediately. You can't throw a football squirrely or you get no spiral. Okay, what about a shot put? Is a constraint that actually helps throwers. The weight. Okay? To throw a shot put, you can't get your arm out here away from your body. with a javelin. It's a long, pointed object that you've got to throw efficiently or it's not going to carry. Right? A baseball, though, is small and it's 5 ounces. So there's some difficulty in it. I can take that 5-ounce baseball all over the place. If I'm not coordinated, if I can't control my spine, I'm going to get in a whole lot of trouble simply because that ball allows me to. Okay? And the last thing here is that injuries typically to pitchers are to soft tissue simply because I don't control and move my spine and my skeleton efficiently. And that you will see posture, acture changes. Now that puts my limbs in a different place than what they should be in space, and therefore that's how pitchers get injured. All right, so as references, Greg Kovetsky, anatomy trains, and this last fellow you can find, he's Japanese, he's a fantastic researcher. In my belief, he's been overlooked throughout the world, especially in baseball in the United States. Very few people know who that guy is, but if you find some of his research, it is groundbreaking. Okay, it's holy grail type of stuff. Okay, what he's talked about, when I said to you that throwing violates the kinetic chain, I got it from Hiroshima. Okay? All right, so hope that this was informative. Again, feel free to ask questions as we move on.
We're going to have a lot of time in the next 40 minutes or so, 30 to 40 minutes to talk about that. So, I think before we